The connection with your spirit beast is a full package deal, Yusuke. It is like your reflection. When you're happy, it will be happy. When you're in pain, it will suffer. And if you die, so will it. It is you.
I used to watch a lot of anime, from Toonami as a kid to binging different anime on GoGo Anime to working part-time for a Crunchyroll subscription. One of my friends and I used to binge whole series on school nights. We would just hit play at the same time, and we even got so good at it that we'd start accounting for Skype's second lag. But even still, I don't know when my love for it shifted from binging a new 12-episode series a weekend to just casually enjoying an episode every week. Nonetheless, I've been thinking about anime and what it means to me personally, so I figured I'd give myself a break because my last 3 videos have been so long, and it's my birthday, so whatever.
Well, if all else fails, I can still make kids happy.
A small caveat though before we begin. This is less of a formal video essay and more of a general reflection on a time in my life. I don't think I'm about to discuss anything that's particularly novel or reflective of some higher form of craft, and it might not even be the best articulation of said subject matter, but nonetheless, it was an experience that felt very personal, and as I seem to have grown older, people have seemed to latch onto it a bit more. So essentially, this is more a meditation on an emotional authenticity of boys in anime, and more specifically, Yusuke Urameshi from Yu Yu Hakusho. A little backstory. I grew up the youngest of 3 brothers who all lived in the same room and shared all the same toys and stuff. And naturally, it also meant watching the same thing when we were all allowed on the television. That's how I was introduced to anime. And while the screaming beam battles of DBZ were interesting and got me hyped to watch every week, there was another show that, while popular, it didn't seem like people latched onto in the same way. Or at very least, not in the circles I was with at the time, and that show was Yu Yu Hakusho, which starred Yusuke Urameshi, who, in his words,
Yusuke Urameshi, the much, much worser punk of...
It always felt weird to like him. I was a pretty passive kid, I wasn't prone to lashing out, and I basically got scared whenever I broke any rules. So why did I latch onto this punk kid who cut class, got into fights after school, and all around just does crude and cruel behavior? Well, the answer is very simple, but also kinda complicated in the greater context of media. You see, in a lot more of the Americanized media I watched as a kid, well, I don't remember any episodes that forced their characters to do emotional labor, like trying to work through feelings of sadness or anger. There was a lot about being happy, but Timmy Turner, Jimmy Neutron, or SpongeBob don't really deal with overwhelming melancholy.
Oton? Hey.
Yes, dear?
Have you ever not known about something that seemed obvious to everybody else?
That happens to us all, I think.
Danny Phantom, I remember tapping into this a bit, and I love all 4 of those shows, not to mention stuff like Hey Arnold or Teen Titans, but more aptly, I can't remember a very specific scene where Robin, Arnold, or Danny, or any one of them cry. And even if they did, it didn't have the same impact on me. But anime is so melodramatic, characters are always mouthing off about how important people in their life are, how they'll walk to the ends of the earth for friends. It's like soap operas with how many monologues there are about feelings.
Tell her how you feel. She's the best thing you've got.
Guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. We're both jerks for love.
And it just so happens that these long-winded monologues about the importance of people is sandwiched between long dramatic fight scenes. Which makes sense, because most animes are long-form narratives, not the episodic adventures of American cartoons. Of course, it's a complaint I've heard about a lot of battle shonens. The characters fight for about 5 minutes before pausing to talk to each other, requiring a large suspension of disbelief from the audience about why these 2 people, who are essentially trying to kill each other, pause to wax poetic about the basis and formation of their own personal ideology. And while I had similar complaints as a kid, I reflect back on these battle shonens with a sense of nostalgia and affection, because now I can genuinely see the drama on display, the need for there to be stakes in the fight, or else this energy beam battle knife edge death match would mean nothing. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of battle shonens that are just beam battles and punching matches, but I'm not talking about those. Because, as their name would suggest, battle shonens are directed towards young boys, so naturally the protagonists and their group of fighters are young boys as well, and the villains are evil reflections of the men they could become, and they treat women and girl characters like shit. The perfect mixture of being able to grow and understand yourself at the expense of someone else.
Come on, Yusuke. Just wake up. I want to go home. Let's go home, Yusuke!
And while I don't want to downplay the horrible treatment of girls in these shows, that's deserving of its own video. And the unfortunate positive side of it is that in order for the show to then have dramatic stakes for their all-male cast, is to have their male characters tap into their emotions and carry the emotional labor for there to be proper drama. It involves having these male characters to tell each other that they care about each other. It involves them having genuine chemistry and forming a bond together over the course of the series. And most importantly, and most namely to me, it involves having to show them cry. And it's here when I have to bring up Yu Yu Hakusho, as I think this show is a great example of this exact thing. The show is still an anime battle shonen and falls into a lot of similar anime conventions as I already mentioned, but Yusuke and Kuwabara, our two leads, are two young boys who genuinely spend the entire series learning how to process their emotions. In fact, the key to growing stronger and winning their over-the-top battles is to access and feel their feelings so that they can become stronger.
It's time you bit the bullet and started caring about something with all your heart and energy. But you can't care about it if you're always holding yourself back in case it doesn't work out.
And the show asks quite a bit from them, from their budding relationship as frenemies to their genuine heartfelt friendship at the end, to just the performances and presentations of their bursts of sadness. I still watch some of these scenes and find myself getting choked up.
You're supposed to be here. For me.
Honestly, even reviewing some of these scenes on YouTube made me get slightly emotional, because everything about it is so genuine and earnest. Despite how crappy and arguably toxic both Yusuke and Kuwabara can be, the show never allows you to not understand their motivations. Yusuke in particular is terrible from the beginning, but after spending a whole day watching his daily routine, from his distant and absent mother, physically and verbally abusive teachers, and disregard and disdain from all of his peers, it's not hard to imagine why this 14-year-old child would lash out at the world around him. We, the audience, can genuinely believe that Yusuke believes no one cares about him.
It figures that on the one day I feel like going to school, everyone wants to push on me and give me their stupid lectures. I hate that school. I hate this town.
And so even a character like Yusuke, who I don't think I have a whole lot in common with, I was able to relate and understand him better, because he's allowed to authentically show himself to be vulnerable in serious moments. Yusuke spends a lot of his fights tearing up from the overwhelming desperations of his current circumstance.
Don't you think I wanted to use my power and win this thing and go home? Of course. I just didn't know how to reach it. And I have to live with that.
Look, the aura of his powers even look like teardrops. And while the process is still shown through the lens of a fight, there aren't many shows I remember growing up with that allowed young boys to be so vulnerable.
You do know this is your fault, right? For living in a constant state of repression.
My favorite scene from the whole series is when Yusuke saves Pooh during his training in the cave. This scene is so fantastic, from the simple color palette of Yusuke in this dark maroon, complemented by the shades of blue in the whole scene, a simple indicator of his whole bodily pain, to the glowing hue of water that rejuvenates him, to just Justin Cook's performance of Yusuke's fears. This whole scene is amazingly brilliant, and maybe I'll do a whole scene analysis of it someday, but for now I just think it hits everything I'm talking about.
Oh, that's just perfect. I even get to let down my own inner self, too.
Yusuke being rejuvenated by Pooh, a creature born from Yusuke, is essentially Yusuke trying to save himself. But Pooh crumples and is withdrawn, and at being shown his own powerlessness, Yusuke tears up and tries his best to stand up again. And after a moment of self-loathing, Yusuke tries to save Pooh, only to be shocked by jolts of pain. Blood splatters out of him, because to confront and understand yourself is painful, and being confronted by your own vulnerability is an internal struggle. But for that to be the thing that motivates Yusuke to destroy a giant boulder and save the literal embodiment of all his insecurities and vulnerabilities validates not only the importance of emotions, but also the strength of those feelings. It's good. I love this scene. While I don't think it's the best thing ever, it's something that's stuck with me forever. And honestly, it's something that I don't get the same feeling from a lot of shows today. Like, I love My Hero Aka and Deku, but I do think the show steering away from him being a quote-unquote crybaby is missing the point of his strength. And obviously, I like Devilman Crybaby too for similar reasons, but I do think that show might lean too hard onto the edge factor. Or maybe I'm just older now and I'm just feeling nostalgic for the show that originally taught me that it was okay to be a bit of a crybaby and allow myself to be vulnerable. It was a show that began to teach me that the only real way to grow is to disregard apathy and indifference and embrace the love of others, and most importantly, yourself.
As a 14-year-old boy, Yusuke Urameshi was struck by a car. Now, with friends and memories locked in his heart, he looks ahead to a new adventure, being all grown up.
But for now, that's all I got. Thank you for watching and sharing this with your friends, and I'll see you all next time.